Hundepraxis, der Podcast mit Christina Räder.
Hey und schön, dass ihr wieder dabei seid zu einer neuen Folge vom Hundepraxis Podcast. Und auch heute sitzt mir wieder ein sehr interessanter Gast gegenüber, der uns ein bisschen aus der Hundewelt bereichern wird. Und ja, wo habe ich ihn gefunden? Bei einem Webinar, wo es darum ging, Hunde oder ja, im Grunde Jagdhunde, wie nennt man das so nett, positiv bestätigend zu trainieren. Und da ging es dann eben darum, dass ich geschaut habe, okay, was macht er, was tut er? Und sehr interessante Dinge kann ich schon mal vorwegnehmen. Und Thomas Stocke, I will switch to English now because he's coming from Sweden. And so we will keep the interview, of course, in English that everybody can understand us. So, yeah, that's a very nice point that you have find the time out for today is to, talk a little bit about positive rewarded training in gun dog because you have a interesting background behind it. I think so, because when I was Googling what's going around you and why you do this seminar, I just found out that you did compete in obedience, in search, in rescue dog training, in agility also in field trials for pointing dogs and spaniels and herding. So Thomas Stocke, nice that you are here now and that you took your time to, speak a little bit about what you're doing with the gun dogs, because I think it's now the profession you're going on to, and you have a nice view about this training. So thank you very much for having you here. And maybe you just introduce you a little bit. What's the background? What did you do? And why are you doing now the gun dog training?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's very nice to be on this podcast. I'm actually Norwegian, but I'm living in Sweden for almost 15 years. And actually, I'm born in Göttingen, okay. But my German is not very fluent anymore.
That's no problem. English is always good.
Yes. So, yes. My formal education is as an ethologist. So I've into behavior science. But I started out with the my family had Dalmatians, but I got hooked right away and doing a lot of dog training and started out with obedience training. And then we had a Rottweiler that I learned a lot with. And when I started out training dogs, it was like more traditional or harsher or more like correction-based training. But maybe I was too good at doing the correction part and not so good at the other part. So it didn't work out that well for me. So my Rottweiler, she took me on this journey to exploring different methods because she was just sour and slow when I when I tried to correct her. But she was very much food driven. So I learned about shaping and clicker training, and then I got much better results with her. And after a while, I also got interested in the hunting part, and I had this hunter's exam, but before I had a dog to share it with, I didn't do it much because, of course, activities without the dog, they don't give that much meaning. So my first hunting dog was a German wire-haired pointer, Drahthaar. So, but then I was already working as a clicker trainer instructor, so it was very natural just to adapt the clicker training to the hunting dog training. And and after that I had some working Cocker Spaniels and an English setter and more German pointers and a lot of Border Collies. So I think it's very interesting to do different things. So as you mentioned, I've been into different dog sports, and I don't have the patience to only stick to one breed and one sport or one type of hunting. So my youngest one is a Basset for the Bretagne. So it's a deer driving dog. So the French use them. The French use them in packs for wild boar and rabbits, but the Scandinavian tradition is you only have one dog, and they have to be these short-legged dogs to make sure that they're not actually chasing, but they're driving in like low stress. Because it's not very nice if the deer come at full speed, so it should be nice and calm.
Okay, so you're always interested in doing something different with the dog. So of course you can take your parallels between how you train a dog for this sport and how you train a dog for this sport. So, but before you got the Basset, you mainly, I thought, did pointing dogs, spaniels,
Yes.
or what's the most that you did in the last time?
Yeah, it's mostly, and it still is bird hunting.
Bird hunting. So bird hunting is the most thing you do. And you explain it a little bit, because how you got to the clicker training and the positive reward based training. So, but how did you, when you come to agility or obedience, how did you introduce it into the gun dog work? What was your thinking about how you using it, or what makes the difference for you?
Well, I think with the foundation training that's very similar, no matter if it's everyday obedience or if it's for some kind of sport. So I think the puppy training and before the dog is starting to work on game or dummies or out in the field, it's very similar. And it started out as, it's almost 20 years ago, we started out with this foundation class for hunting dogs. And the interesting thing was that a lot of the like German pointer, Münsterländer, and setters, and people, the students, they got interested in dog training, and they wanted to try different things, like obedience training that we offered mostly at that time. And then what I saw when I had this mixed group in an obedience class was that the gun dogs were they were more well trained than the border collies and the more working dog types, because when they got a toy, they could deliver to hand, and they can drop it on cue, and they could keep their positions, and it was all of the things that we worked on in the foundation, like the gun dog foundation class. It was like a clear verbal release when it is okay to move, when are you finished holding on to the object, how do you cooperate with different types of rewards, and some of the more herding dogs or working dogs. They were just so keen, and they didn't have all that control that you need. So I think it also has influenced how we like the foundation work for the other dog sports. But of course, it's a lot of the gun dog foundation work. It's just about building a good working relationship and having you could call it extreme everyday obedience. If something super tempting shows up all of a sudden, can you recall or stop your dog? Or can the dog accept to stay in very tempting environments? And so it's just everyday obedience to the extreme.
I think it's also a little bit similar to what also a very nice person, I don't know if you know her, Philippa Williams, that's also into the gun dog work in England.
Yes.
And she's always telling it's just obedience what you're doing with your dogs. And always when we talk about also dummy training, it's some people think they have to go out every day and to do everything. And no, it's just always the obedience and the right things, always to do them. Yeah, clearly the same. And it's just to have the dogs always also in your usual environment or in your house and what you're doing on your walks. And so it's not just the training out on the thing you are sporting or competing on. It's just what you're having around your all day.
Yes. I think that's a very good point, because some people, I don't know, how do you train the stop signal? I don't have pigeons or birds at home, or people think that. I think one of the most interesting things when having trained and done trials in a lot of different sports is that sometimes it gets very narrow. So you think that, what I'm doing is so different to everything else. And just as you said, Philippa Williams said that it's just obedience, and I think it's just dog training. If it's a hare, or if it's a guy in a suit with a bite arm to bite, or if it's an agility tunnel, it's just a dog that doesn't know when it's okay to get it and when you should leave it. So and then sometimes it's difficult for us to explain to the dog when to do this and when to do something else. So it's
So you said it before a little bit that you think or you've seen that it's not so many difference in it if a dog, but I don't know about how to talk about when a dog is disobedient in an agility parcours, or how you want them to do something for agility. It's not that far away from running in as a gun dog or stuff like this. Maybe you can explain it a little bit, maybe on an example, what you observed in different sporting parts, what's the same. It's you said it's very, very, very similar what's going on there. If you take this sport or this sport, maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, I think, of course, you use the word disobedient, but sometimes it's easy to give the responsibility too much to the dog.
Yeah.
but of course, if I change it around and say that I haven't explained my dog when to do this and when to do something else. Because what happens often is that if it's very, very clear to the dog when is the behavior finished and when do you switch to something else? Because if it's super easy for me to engage the dog in what I want, and then the dog sticks to that behavior until I tell the dog, now this is finished, now you can switch to something else. Then we have the perfect dogs and no problems at all. So it's if you send a dog on a blind to a dummy or a bird that is shot and the dog stays on that line, it's perfect. If you want the dog to retrieve and the dog holds on to the dummy or the bird, and even if there are a lot of distractions, and if you want the dog to stay at heel, or you want the dog to stay at the start line in agility, or maybe on the seesaw with this 2-on, 2-off behavior, or when should the dog heel and when should the dog go and bite the guy in the suit, and it's when to sit and when to retrieve. And sometimes I think a lot of the training is if you look for like provoking mistakes, then you focus on the mistakes. But if you think that when does the dog when has the dog earned the reward, and you catch them in the act when they're doing the right thing. And of course, the more keen the dogs are, if you just think about the criteria, it's a little bit difficult, because we humans tend to do like patterns and do the same. And then I think the dog is obedient, but I taught my dog that the gunshot is the new cue to retrieve, or my arm moving is the release in agility, or the hand goes into my pocket is the cue to drop the dummy. And it's just that I don't know what I'm actually teaching the dog, but I think many times when dogs are disobedient, in my eyes, they're actually, I have taught them something else. And I think that's very, very interesting way when training the dogs, that like asking the dog a question, like, and instead of being afraid of the mistakes, I can also challenge the dog and in a playful way, and kind of ask the dog, if I change it a little bit like this, or if I add some distractions, and I ask the dog, can you still do it? And then they try to go for the distraction, and then I repeat, and then they learn that, oh, if I just stick to this, then I can have it afterwards. Because the problem is, I think with the working dogs or agility dogs, you want the working dog to bite the guy in the suit with a lot of drive. And you want the dog to retrieve. You want the dog to flush the birds. You want the dog to be super fast on the agility field and take the tunnels, but only when I tell them to. So there, I think this self-control and like external reward system is very important, because then you don't take away the drive and confidence, but you tell them when is it okay and when is it not okay.
Yeah, very interesting point. Of course, maybe it's just a little bit. I didn't take you explained what I'm thinking about, but yeah, it's it's fast said that the dog's disobedient, but usually, mostly the people. I always observe the people when they say, "Oh, my dog doesn't this," or "My dog doesn't this." I don't look to the dog, because I just watch the people, what they're doing while they're acting, and while they're saying, "Oh, my dog doesn't this." it's always interesting to see what the dog is focusing about, what they told him, what they think they told him, or what they think they teached him, and what they actually really teached the dog. And always when I say it on heel work, is also of course a nice example, or also a nice point, because in the retrieving we need it. Very nice heel work. It makes very many things really easy if the dog's on heel, because I always say when the dog's in heel and when he knows what's healing in this situation, he won't run in or he won't do anything else. Otherwise, you told him to do anything else. And so it's, I think, one of the basic parts for us in the dummy training. And it's always nice to see what the dog reacts to. If it's the shoulder, or if it's the head that's coming around, or if it's really the left leg that are on it. And but the disobedient maybe is always a misunderstanding from the people, and they're always focusing on the dog, what the dog's doing, but they have to see really and to understand, because you explained it now very nice that you in the foundation training, it's just to connect the dog to acoustic signal, or what's the thing the dog is taught and connected to. And you always have to go from one signal to the next signal, or when is the signal finished, or the behavior finished. That's if a person realize this and does it always, and in the whole time of the dog living, also out of the training field. I think it's a very nice and easy way, but and they have
and of course that's what you said there is one of the hardest things, that like in always when you are with the dog. So I understand like the British tradition where working dogs don't live in the house. It's so much easier to be consistent, because if you have them in the house, you repeat the cues, and and the dog can leave a position without being asked, and you have excitement by the door and when feeding, and it's so many things that if the dog would live in a kennel, it would be much easier. But then of course, is the dog only is it a companion or just a working tool or something in between? But
also a nice point you're saying, because I think the most persons that are listening to it now here are people that have their dogs always around in the house. And it's also when you are doing positive rewarded training, you have to be careful what you're doing around in the house. I recognize many persons that are saying, I do this training and I love to give my dog a positive reward, but they're talking the whole time different things to their dog, but that's not meant with positive rewarded training. Always just to speak in a nice voice with the dog, and always to be speaking and talking and feeding. It's always, of course, timing and to do the right things in the right time. Maybe you can also say something about this, because when we have the dogs all the time around us in the house, of course, because we like our dogs and we want to have them as a friend in our house, it's not easier to do the really positive rewarded training, because you have to look at some aspects what you really have to be careful to, I think.
I think it's more challenging to be a good trainer, maybe 16 hours a day if you are awake and spend time with your dog. But if you only take them out 15 minutes a day from the kennel, it's much easier. But of course, I'm not saying that one thing is better or worse than the other. It's just an observation that it makes it more challenging in everyday life with the dog to be consistent and be the perfect dog trainer always. So, but now we talked a lot about when behaviors start and when they end, and to be clear with the criteria and the cues. But of course, the perfect reward for a retriever would be to ask them to fetch something. But of course, we know that if you just ask the dog to sit and stay, and you throw a dummy, and the only reward for sitting and staying is to retrieve, even if that's the best for that dog, it doesn't really work like that in the real world, especially if it's a real gunshot and a live bird. It's so exciting. So with many dogs, even if your timing is good and all that, and you vary the time, it's not uncommon that it falls apart. So I think also the arousal part is important, that how excited the dog is, because of course if there's too much adrenaline, it's hard to control yourself. So one example from this in the house, I had a black working cocker bitch, and she was a very nice dog and easy to train and quite balanced, like steady minded. So it's not too like it was not this crazy cocker, but quite nice balance. But I noticed that when we have a lot of dogs in the house, and when I wanted to feed them, I go out to this to the room where I feed, and then I called one dog at a time to come, and I noticed that she started to make a little bit of noise when I called her, and just the presence of all the other dogs and everyone was so keen, it was a little bit too much. But she was quite young when I noticed it, so I started to think that, okay, a common question is, what do I do if the dog makes noise? But the question is wrong, because I'm focusing on what I don't want the dog to do. And then I could think about criteria. Should I wait until she doesn't make noise, maybe for 10 seconds or 30 seconds? But I still think the question is, or the approach is a little bit wrong, because you focus on, like, you let the dog rehearse the bad behavior first, even if I try not to reward it. So what I ended up doing was that I didn't feed her with the other dogs, and I wouldn't take her through that door to feed, but I took her out alone through the back door. And when she didn't expect me to feed her, then I fed her. So I think that's the other part of a lot of the gun dog training, is that you don't just look at the behavior, but of course you look at the dog's behavior, but how does your dog look like when it's like concentrated and calm, and how high are the expectations? And that's a common problem, that we have these routines. We feed them at the same time, and we take them for a walk, and they know that, oh, that jacket and that bag means, and the whistle around your neck. And then they start to get excited, or you are by some water or with other dogs, then they know things will happen. And that's of course that's it's good, because if they are half asleep, they can't work. But if it goes over the top, so I think we have to also think about this variation and not doing the same. And that's super, super hard in everyday life. And if you, like, if I go hunting in the mountains, or if I go training with a group, and if you drive 8 hours up to the mountains, and you stay in a cabin, and you go skiing with 10 other dogs, of course you let your dog off leash. You don't do that, and don't just walk on leash a little bit and then drive home. So, but it's so it's very easy to make the dogs too excited, and maybe that's one of the things you have to watch out, because the problem with the rewards is that the dog it makes the dog happy. And if they're happy, they might get excited, but you also want this calm and collected behavior, and make sure that the dog learns that pays off. So rewarding is not just running around and throwing a tennis ball, but it can also be that the calmer rewards, and you can mix it up.
Yeah. So
I often say that if the dog pretends if the dog pretends they don't want it, then they can get it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. And so when we come back to the point that you chose the positive way or the rewarded based training because you didn't like to do some corrections or whatever, because you want to take the training also enjoyable for the dog, and of course also for you, because I don't think people like to do corrections with dogs, and we know that there are different ways to do some things. And you described to the training that all distractions are potential rewards. So maybe back to really different sporting parts, but a distraction is not to make the dog insecure or whatever, but you maybe described it a little bit before, to challenge the dog a little bit, and then to take this reward. So what's the part in it the dog has to learn about?
I think the most important is that if you have that you build some kind of reward system. So it's not just saying good or click and then the dog can do whatever. So of course, you can have a lot of different marker words, or you can have only a few. But the most important, I think, is the reward coming from my hands or my pockets, or is the dog allowed to run away from me to get the reward? So where it's coming from. And then, of course, if you have a very food-driven dog or very toy or object-driven dog, it would be nice also to have one cue for maybe fetch or get it, and some other word for eating, and one for getting the object, because then you can quite early, once the dog is keen, you can have use different marker words, and it sets the expectation, and also takes away a little bit of the frustration and disappointment, because sometimes if people just say good and they throw food, and then they say good and they throw the ball, the dog loves the ball, but it's actually starting to search for food, because that's the expectation. And I think that's super important, that the dog doesn't say, no, thank you, I want to do anything else. So you don't want the dog, you want the dog to say, yes, anything you say, I love to do without hesitation. So and I think that's super important, because how should the dog understand that holding on to the dummy or staying at heel or stopping to a stop whistle? And that's the key, or the kind of the ticket to get the reward. So that's why you need very clear reward markers, so that the dog understands that the only way to getting what you want is to do what I want, so that you actually reinforce the right behavior and not have to repeat it and point, and the dog still doesn't understand, and then you actually reinforce something completely different, or just cause confusion.
very nice point for I think for the finishing now. To keep the expectation and always talk or always teach the dog really what you want or what you expect and what the dog can expect when you're telling him this and that. And that's the easiest way, but you have to think about and what's your goal and what you want to go for. And I think there are many different things you have to be clear about before you get into dog training, and then it's getting very much easier if you're really known for it. And if you want to come a little bit more into this, you can of course watch what Thomas is doing in Sweden. There we of course take the homepage, the link down between the podcast, but you're also in a training class with Leben mit Hunden in Deutsch. It's also online. So I think in this time when the podcast comes out, it's always possible to get into this class. We will also take the link between or under the podcast. So if you're interested, just have a look. It's a workshop. I don't know how it is called about. It's zum eingespielten Team mit Leben mit Hunden. There is Thomas also inside, and there you did also a part about this class and this workshop. And so if you're interested, just join it. And thank you very much, Thomas, for your time and for your thoughts, and very interesting how you see this training world, because you see it from different point of views, because you did very different training parts, and you come, I think, always to the basic point back, or you come always to the basic point back to, it's just about know what the dog take as a reward, and then know what you want the dog to do, and then just tell him when the behavior is finished. That's I think a nice point. It's always the same. And it's just to also for the people to understand the systems. It's a system. It's always a very common or very similar. It's just to introduce it in the sporting world you are into.
And there so many things that the dog is allowed to do. It's okay that they pee. It's okay that they eat. It's okay that they say hi to people. It's okay that they say hi to dogs. But when do you want them to do? And in those situations where you don't want the dog to do it right now, what do you actually want the dog to do instead? Because then you know what to reward. So it's, and I think when you talked about the reasons why I started with clicker training, or I think, of course, the dog's welfare and having fun and all that is important. But I also think that it affects my mood. And if even if I work as a dog trainer, dog training and dogs it's still a hobby. So when I look for look for wanted behaviors and behaviors to reward, my mood is much better, because if I only look for mistakes, it doesn't make me happy. So it's so I also think that it's this mental part for us as trainers. If I start to look for things to correct, it can ruin my day and I can overdo it. So it's not good for me to look for the negatives.
Yes, so very good point of view, and I think very interesting. And of course, if somebody is interested, just take the link between the podcast, and then you can find, I think, many informations more about you, your work, and what you're doing with them. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being here. And I think very nice, interesting information. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Hundepraxis, der Podcast mit Christina Räder.